I will start without Sweta.
Yes.
Camera rolling. Video roll. Interviews. Let's begin with your short introduction, like your name, where are you affiliated with, and how are you here?
Yes. Well, my name is in Russian Andrei Paribok. In Sanskrit, I propose it to be pronounced Andreya Paribhoga. I graduated in St. Petersburg in Russia from the Oriental department as a Sanskritist. But last 5 or 6 years, I work in Moscow at the РУДН University, People's Friendship University. Mainly, I'm interested in Indian philosophy and in Indian linguistical traditions as representing the Indian variety of reason as quite distinct from the European variety of reason.
Okay. And could you tell us about specific features of Nepali philosophy?
See, the Nepali philosophy is characterized, you see, by mixture, by the coexistence of the Nevari people and Nepali people, and two dharma traditions, the Bauddha tradition and the Hindu tradition. And for example, there are preserved 9 dharmas in the Nepali Buddhism. It's worthwhile, and also the Indian Brahmanical traditions of philosophy are quite present, Nyaya, for example, and so on. So I think that it is a productive field for interaction between the Buddhist tradition, which is almost extinct in India, and the Brahmanical tradition. And I think the perspectives are quite bright for the Nepalese thinking and the Nepalese philosophy in this way. But the crucial point is to learn or relearn or to preserve the ability to think, write, and speak in Sanskrit, and partly perhaps in Tibetan. That's.
And how did you meet Sanskrit? Like, what happened? Where did you come to this decision that okay, I want to study this?
Well, first I was a physicist, but then 2 aspects which are, so to say, quite peculiar as to me, so to the Indian culture and the philosophy. I was very interested in yoga. That in my youth, it was only the physical yoga, the hatha yoga. And second, I was very fond of languages. So I wanted to study Sanskrit, and then I changed the faculty from the 4th year of the Department of Physics. I changed it for the 3rd year of the Department of the Sanskrit, and then I studied Sanskrit and also Pali. My first great work was a translation of a big Pali text. But what I'll mention, it is worthwhile because you see, every philosophical tradition has various links dependent on the culture with other forms of the high culture. In Europe, it is mathematics, and perhaps, first of all, mathematics, then sciences and others. But in India, there are 2 non-philosophical domains of the high culture. I mean, Vyakaranam and Yoga. Yes. And they interacted both philosophy, because it is hardly imaginable an Indian philosopher who hasn't studied Vyakarana and Panini. And even such consummated philosophers of everyday reason as Vaisheshika, they with some reserve and some respect speak about yoga. And as to all Buddhist schools, partly Nyaya school, the Sankhya and Yoga, and also all varieties of Vedanta, they are unimaginable without yoga practice.
And you said that you were a student of physics.
Yes.
And then you changed into Sanskrit.
Yes.
Do you see any familiarities in Sanskrit as well? Because when I was researching, I'm a very basic. I don't know a lot. But
No. No, certainly not as far as the science proper is concerned, because you see there are other similarities because the Indian reason is not so theoretical as methodological, and the first big classic of the Indian thinking is Panini, and it is methodology of producing Sanskrit, not of studying Sanskrit. The result of Ashtadhyayi is Sanskrit. Yes. And it is so to say a computer mind. That's why, for example, not only in Bengaluru but totally in India, there is such a preponderance and brilliance of Indian IT technology, IT thinking, and software and soft writing. So Europeans are theoreticians, and these are methodologists. They prescribe rules how to produce something in the field of language and in other fields. It's peculiar to India, and also one feature not alien to this peculiarity is that the Indian philosophy is dissimilar from the European philosophy in such a way. The European philosophers concentrated on cognition. But also there are other fields, but cognition is their main aim and purpose. But the Indian philosophers concentrate on education of the spirit of a man, yes, and well-educated and well-trained according to Vyakarana, to Nyaya, to Yoga, person understands and has the cognition, but it is not expressed it is not always expressed in Indian philosophical text. It must be discovered individually. That's, I think, the main difference and the main, we'll see, strong point of the Indian philosophy.
Okay. What role does Sanskrit play in Buddhism? I'm a Buddhist myself.
I also am Buddhist myself. Yes. So, well, in the very beginnings, Bhagavan Buddha spoke in various dialects which were current in his time. For example, if we compare Dhammapada in Pali, Gandhari Dhammapada, and Udana Varga in Sanskrit, we see many similarities, but also a good deal of dissimilarities, because they were composed by different editors after generations from the Buddha. But then, as there grew forth the very known process, namely Sanskritization, the Buddhist texts were gradually retranslated from these old dialects into Sanskrit, sometimes not without fault. For example, there is a uposatha in Pali. It is upavashatha in Sanskrit. It is fasting. But it was erroneously translated as uposhadha and remained enigmatic. There is no such phrase, and so on. Sometimes there were grammatical mistakes. For example, in old Buddhist texts, we see the form shashti, bhikshusya, instead of bhikshu, and so on. But still, it was Sanskrit was always indispensable for all shastric works. And all Shastra masters, for example, Vasubandha, Asanga, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Deva, so on, wrote only in Sanskrit, because it is a peculiar feature of the Indian rationality. All its subtleties can be expressed totally only in Sanskrit. If we translate it in other language, or even in the most intellectual language of the Europe as German, there are many mistakes and inadequacies. Certainly, we can say that, for example, the Buddhist variety of philosophical thinking was almost adequately translated into Tibetan. It is so, but the Tibetan Buddhists never translated the Brahmanical Shastras. So it is only partial correspondence. But so it is indispensable to think Sanskrit. And I would add what is needed. There are 3 siddhis are needed to master Sanskrit. I say Smrti Siddhi, the supernormal faculty of memory. Vikalpa Siddhi, supernormal faculty of imagination. And Mati Siddhi, supernormal faculty of reasoning. If one lacks one of them, the result will be incomplete.
Is there a way to check if you have adequate of these siddhis?
Well, the first requisite is the true interest. If you have it, then you can then you can master, or some deficiencies will be overcome by you. But with lack of interest, nothing comes out. Yes.
Let me see. Before going into that, I wanted to ask. So, I guess this is also your first time in Nepal, right?
Yes.
How are you liking Nepal, and World Sanskrit Conference is happening in Nepal? How are you finding this experience?
You see, I'm extremely fond of Kathmandu. Yes. It is it is so typical for the Indian type of reason. For example, the people. One ordinary example: there are no accidents on the roads, although there lacks almost totally any regulation. Yes. Because all people are, from the European point of view, extraordinarily attentive and relaxed. So I would say they practice yoga of driving. It's impossible and unimaginable either in Russia or for example in the United States. Yeah. Then they have formal regulations alien for the human reason, and then it is human reason and attention which masters of the situation. Yeah.
It's this. So it's a very managed chaos. Everything looks very chaotic. The vehicles going on and all.
Yes.
The rules are not followed, but it's going on.
Yeah, they are going one through others without vexing each other.
Quite Nepalese are very used to that state of consciousness around.
Yeah. Yes.
Jokes apart, I also wanted to ask you about. So how does Indian tradition? I asked this question to Rosanna earlier. I want to ask this question to you as well. How does Indian tradition of teaching Sanskrit differ from the Western and Russian?
So the Western tradition, in which I was initially taught, the Russian tradition, depends on the German tradition, and it started with Indo-European linguistics. We were taught totally in the Western manner, for example, with the names of the cases, ablative, also accusative, and so on, with the names of the verbal forms. We knew nothing about the Indian tradition, and that's first. Second, the students were concentrated on rather old, sometimes obsolete texts. For example, such as Upanishadic texts. You see, in the 19th century, the European Indologists were very fond of the Veda tradition. So we could read, for example, Brahmanas or Aranyakas, but when confronted with the mature Sanskrit style, we felt a bit perplexed. I myself studied Panini, And now I know Lat, Lut, and so on, and all the, not all, but half of the Anubandhas. But I didn't even know the very term of Anubandha in the university. Yes. And you see, this relearning reshaped my mind, my linguistical mind. And and that's why, for example, because of this stress on the rather old text, it was told, we were told, and I think it is certainly erroneous, that the older Indian texts, be they are philosophical or the Kavya, for example, Bharavi or Bana, are a bit degraded, too artificial, and so on. Yeah. But when I studied myself, I found that they are not at all degraded, but their artificiality appeals to my mind. Then once I had a suggestion and asked a Brahmana. I said to him, it seems to me that the esteemed European philologists and their audience had oriented towards people with a bit lower level of the linguistic intelligence than the Indian, or than the traditional Indian readers and the traditional Indian writers. Oh yes, said he, you're quite right. Because it is, you see, it is for everybody who is proud of his own culture, for example, Europeans, he feels shameful that the other culture, Indian, excels in this linguistic intellect. But we must confess it's so, and climb on these heights.
Okay, so
from you, you wanted about yoga, no? No.
yes. Yeah. Is there a message that you want to share to people who is studying yoga, since you started Sanskrit?
Yes. Now, this spring and in the beginning of summer, I held a lecture, held a course of lectures, 16 lectures on yoga. On yoga, well, what is the message? You see, every yogic tradition has the purpose of transcending the human condition. That is the main point. If somebody wants only to ameliorate, to live better, then go elsewhere. It is not the goal of yoga. That's first. Secondly, every yogic tradition has three components: adhi, prajna, panya, shiksha. That's the highest learning of the understanding of the reason, and with the ontological perspective, ontological horizon, what is your ultimate goal? Second, adhishila shiksha, how to manage yourself in ordinary life. For example, in Patanjali tradition, these are yama and niyama, yes? And second, adhichitta shiksha, that's the yogic procedure proper of mastery of one's chitta. But I think that typically, not in the Indian subcontinent, not in Nepal, neither in Nepal nor in Bharat, but in the all great West, they are too fond of the technical side of yoga, of the meditation, and even less with the asanas, and they pay little attention to the adipajna shiksha, and it is the central element. Before you understand what are you striving for, you will be disappointed after some years. Yes. And you must take seriously the perspective of siddhis, of transcending the human condition, of kaivalya or moksha and immortality. Without it, it will be a misused legacy of Indian culture and Indian reason in the context of European reason. So first of all is the good philosophy of yoga, and then you can train yourself in several meditations, dhyanas, samadhi, so on in asanas. But you know what is the aim of asanas? It is to have it is to balance your body and mind, in which case you will be successful in dhyana. It is not a goal in itself. That is because what the widespread yoga nowadays is no more than very effective. I confess it, but only Indian fitness. But yoga is no fitness.
Me personally also, I am on a very spiritual journey at the moment. So I do meditations, yogas, and I try to be fit. But yeah, that's I think I get what you mean. Like very very thankful for whatever you said. Like, do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
Well, Pathatu Sanskritam, Vadatu Sanskritam. It is the very foundation of the self-development of mind.
I'm more and more interested in learning Sanskrit as I speak to you and other scholars. So thank you so much.
Shubhamastu.
Thank you so much. Shubhamastu. Thank you.